At 2:13 a.m., a man in a black suit placed a handgun on the emergency room desk and looked at the terrified receptionist. If Luca Vassari dies, nobody leaves this building. The entire trauma floor went silent. Nurses froze beside medication carts. A resident stopped halfway through pulling on his gloves. Only Evelyn Hart kept writing. She finished the dosage note, capped her pen, then raised her eyes toward the stranger. "Pick up the gun. You're frightening my patients." His jaw tightened. Before he could answer, the ambulance doors slammed open and 6 men rushed in around a blood-soaked stretcher. Luca Vassari lay beneath the harsh lights, one hand pressed against his ribs, his white shirt dark with blood. Even half-conscious, he looked dangerous. 36. Broad shoulders. Black hair damp against his forehead. A face built for magazine covers and police files. One paramedic tried to secure an oxygen mask. Luca caught his wrist. "Don't touch me." The medic stepped back immediately. Evelyn did not. She moved beside the stretcher, checked his pulse, then cut through his expensive shirt with trauma shears. Luca's eyes opened fully. Dark, sharp, furious. That shirt cost $8,000. Evelyn peeled the ruined fabric away from the wound. "Keep talking, and I'll cut the pants too." Someone behind her choked on a laugh. The sound died when Luca turned his head. Evelyn pressed gauze against his side. The bullet had passed through, but the bleeding was wrong. Too steady, too difficult to control. How long ago? Luca's gaze stayed fixed on her face. 30 minutes. Try again. A muscle moved along his jaw. 45. Evelyn looked at the dried blood beneath the fresh stain. At least 2 hours. The men around the stretcher exchanged quick glances. There it was. The first lie. She pushed the stretcher toward Trauma 1. 3 nurses stood outside the room, none willing to enter. Evelyn pointed at the doors. "I need saline, 2 units of O-negative, and a surgical tray." The armed man from the desk stepped forward. "Mr. Vassari has his own physician. Then his physician can explain why he brought a dying man to my hospital." Luca's fingers closed. Around Evelyn's forearm. The grip was weak, but deliberate. "You don't know who you're speaking to." She looked down at his hand, then back into his eyes. "Right now, you're a patient with low blood pressure and a terrible personality." For 1 second, something unexpected flickered across Luca's face. Not anger. Interest. Evelyn pulled free and entered the room. She worked quickly, cutting away fabric, cleaning the wound, checking his pupils. Luca refused pain medication. "I need my head clear. Pain doesn't make you powerful. It makes you difficult. People usually tremble around me." Evelyn leaned closer to inspect the bruising beneath his ribs. His breath touched her cheek, warm and controlled despite the blood loss. "Maybe they know you better." His eyes dropped briefly to her mouth before returning to her face. The moment lasted less than a second, but the air changed. Evelyn stepped back first. "Start the 4. A young nurse reached for the prepared saline bag. Luca's hand shot out and locked around Evelyn's wrist. "Not that one." She followed his stare. The plastic seal looked intact, but Evelyn noticed a pinprick near the injection port and a faint oily residue clinging to the inside of the bag. She stopped the young nurse before the line could be connected. "Seal it and send it to toxicology." Nobody moved. Luca's warning had come seconds before the contaminated fluid entered his bloodstream. Luca released her slowly. Someone changed it. Evelyn looked through the glass wall at the crowded hallway. Doctors, guards, hospital staff, family. Any one of them could have touched that bag. She met Luca's gaze again, and for the first time, the fear in the room belonged to neither of them. The person who wanted Luca Vassari dead was already inside the hospital. Evelyn removed the poisoned 4 bag with gloved hands and sealed it inside an evidence container. "Nobody touches anything in this room unless I approve it." The young nurse beside her swallowed hard, while 2 of Luca's guards moved toward the door. Luca lifted his head from the pillow, his face pale, but his voice still controlled. "Lock down the hospital." The order traveled through the room like a blade. Within seconds, men in dark suits reached for radios. Doors began closing, and the hallway filled with frightened voices. Evelyn turned from the monitor. "No." Every head shifted toward her. Luca's eyes narrowed. "No." She stepped closer to the bed, checking the line now running from a fresh bag she had opened herself. "You can secure this floor. You do not shut down the emergency department." One of the guards scoffed. "Ma'am, someone just tried to kill him." Evelyn adjusted the flow rate without looking up. And a 70-year-old man in room 208 is having a heart attack. A child in pediatrics is waiting for surgery. Your boss is not the only person in this building who deserves to live. Silence pressed against the walls. Luca watched her for a long moment, his fingers resting against the white sheet. Open a medical corridor, he finally ordered. My people control everything else. The guards moved immediately. Evelyn checked his blood pressure again. Congratulations. You made one reasonable decision tonight. Theo entered carrying 3 coffees and stopped when he saw the sealed evidence bag. I leave for 4 minutes, and someone poisons the boss. Evelyn took all 3 cups from his hands. Theo stared at her. One of those was mine. She placed 2 beside the nurse's station and kept the 3rd. You look alert enough to keep worrying. A faint sound came from Luca's bed. Not quite laughter, but close. Evelyn looked over. His mouth had barely moved, yet the hard line around it had softened. You find this amusing? His gaze traveled over her face. I'm beginning to. She ignored the strange warmth that rose beneath her collar and reached for his chart. The lab results arrived 10 minutes later. His blood contained a powerful anticoagulant, far too much to be explained by emergency treatment. Evelyn studied the numbers twice, then a 3rd time. This was already in your system before the shooting. Luca's expression changed. The humor vanished. Theo stepped closer. How long before? Several hours. Maybe more. Evelyn moved beside the bed and pressed 2 fingers against the bruising near Luca's ribs. His body tensed beneath her touch. She leaned in to examine the discoloration, close enough to feel the controlled rhythm of his breath against her cheek. Luca's attention settled on her face instead of the injury. You still don't tremble. Evelyn kept her hand steady against his side. Are you disappointed? Curious. His voice dropped lower. Most people understand what happens when they get this close to me. Her eyes lifted to his. Maybe most people aren't trying to keep you alive. For one suspended second, neither of them moved. His body radiated heat beneath her palm, and something sharper than fear passed between them. Evelyn stepped back first and removed her gloves. The drug could have been given through an injection, food, or a drink. Who had access to you today? Theo pulled out a phone and opened the private security feed from Luca's residence. They reviewed the hours before the shooting, staff, guards, family members, business associates. Then the footage stopped on a crowded dining room. A woman in an ivory dress approached Luca with a glass of bourbon and placed it directly into his hand. Theo went still. Luca's jaw tightened. Evelyn looked from the screen to him. Who is she? The monitor beside him began beating faster. Luca watched the frozen image for several seconds before answering. Bianca, my sister. Evelyn studied the untouched bottle on the table behind her. The drink made Bianca look guilty, but it proved only that she had carried the glass, not what had been placed inside it before she arrived. Luca stared at the frozen frame of his sister holding the glass, but the suspicion in the room never touched his face. It settled deeper, behind the eyes, where men like him kept the thoughts that could start wars. Evelyn watched the monitor instead. His heart rate had climbed again. You need rest. I need answers. Luca pushed the blanket aside. Evelyn caught his shoulder before he could sit up. You lost too much blood. I've worked under worse conditions. I'm sure that sounded impressive in your head. Theo turned away, hiding a smile. Luca looked down at Evelyn's hand against his chest, then back at her. She removed it first. 48 hours, she added. No leaving. No. Whiskey. No private doctors. His expression hardened. I'll be gone in 4. Evelyn reached beneath the bed, took the folded black trousers and shirt his men had brought, and handed them to the young nurse beside her. Put these somewhere secure. Luca's gaze sharpened. You're confiscating my clothes? I'm protecting the public. Theo coughed into his fist. Boss, for what it's worth, the hospital gown is very commanding. Luca turned his head slowly. Theo stopped smiling. Evelyn checked the 4-line. Call Bianca. Confirm where the drink came from. Until then, nobody accuses anyone. You don't give orders to my family. Inside this room, I give orders to your blood pressure. A crash sounded in the hallway. Glass shattered. Luca's entire body went rigid. His hand closed around the rail, breath suddenly shallow. Evelyn noticed before anyone else did. The reaction vanished almost as quickly, but not quickly enough. What was that? Theo glanced outside. Medication tray. New nurse dropped it. Luca released the rail. Then tell her to be more careful. His tone was flat, yet the pulse at his throat betrayed him. Evelyn made a note in the chart. Post-traumatic response. His eyes turned dangerous. Delete that. No, Evelyn. It was the first time he used her name. Low. Controlled. Too intimate for a warning. She met his gaze without blinking. You can intimidate everyone else after discharge. For a second, neither moved. Then a faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. You enjoy this. Keeping difficult men alive? She adjusted the monitor lead against his chest. It pays the bills. Hours passed. The hospital quieted, but Luca remained awake, studying every sound beyond the glass. Near dawn, a pediatric resident approached Evelyn with an update about a boy injured during the same shooting. Luca looked away, pretending not to listen. He'll recover, the resident murmured. Surgery went well. Evelyn nodded. The family. Bills were already covered. Anonymous donor. Her eyes shifted toward Luca. He was staring at the ceiling. Anonymous, she repeated. He did not respond. Something in her opinion of him changed, only slightly, but enough to bother her. Later, when she returned with medication, she found him standing by the window despite explicit orders. Back in bed, Luca held an old photograph between his fingers. A young woman in scrubs smiled beside a much younger version of him. Around her neck hung a silver cross. On the back, in faded ink, were the words, "Don't let power turn you into someone I can't recognize." Evelyn looked up. Luca was already watching her. His gaze moved from the photograph to her face, lingering on her eyes. The color drained from his expression. You look like her. Evelyn's grip tightened around the medicine cup. Who? He turned the photograph toward her. My sister. She died 12 years ago. Then his voice dropped to something colder. And she died because of me. Luca turned the photograph face down, but the damage was already done. For the first time since he entered the hospital, the man who controlled every room looked like he wanted to disappear from one. Evelyn placed the medicine cup on the table. You don't owe me that story. His eyes stayed on the photo. Sophia was 24. A nurse. Stubborn enough to argue with armed men and reckless enough to believe everyone could be saved. Sounds exhausting. A breath almost became a laugh, then died in his chest. She warned me someone inside the family was feeding information to our enemies. I told her fear had made her careless. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. 3 days later, she pulled me out of an ambush. I made it home. She didn't. Evelyn did not offer pity. Men like Luca often knew how to survive sympathy by turning it into anger. Instead, she handed him the medication. Take these. He stared at the pills. That's your response. Grief doesn't cancel your antibiotic schedule. Luca studied her face as if searching for judgment, and finding none irritated him. You were asking questions about her. Your sister came up because your entire staff acts like her name might detonate the building. My family is not your concern. Evelyn crossed her arms. Good. I already have enough difficult patients. The corner of his mouth moved despite himself. She reached for his arm to check the foresight, and he flinched before her fingers touched him. Not from pain. From memory. Evelyn slowed, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. You hate hospitals because of her. Luca's gaze sharpened. Careful. You distrust medical staff, react to broken glass, and refuse sedation even while bleeding. I'm not invading your privacy. I'm reading symptoms. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. And what do your symptoms say about you? Her hand paused over the tape, securing his fore. His eyes moved to the thin chain beneath her collar, where a man's ring rested against her skin. You don't wear it on your finger, he continued, but you never take it off. Evelyn's expression cooled. That isn't in my chart. Neither was Sophia. The silence between them sharpened. Luca could have pushed. Men like him usually did. Instead, he leaned back and released the question. Another time. Something inside Evelyn shifted. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. He had seen the boundary and chosen not to cross it. She replaced the dressing over his ribs, her fingertips brushing warm skin. Luca's breathing deepened, controlled but no longer indifferent. Hold still. You're very close. You're very injured. His eyes dropped briefly to her mouth. Both can be true. Heat climbed the back of her neck, unwelcome and impossible to ignore. Evelyn tightened the bandage 1 degree more than necessary. Luca inhaled sharply. That was deliberate. Prove it. Theo entered before the silence could become something else. Toxicology cleared the bourbon. The anticoagulant was delivered another way. Luca's face hardened. Evelyn examined the inside of his forearm again and found a tiny puncture beneath the fading bruises. The mark was clean, deliberate, and positioned exactly where a private clinician might place an injection without drawing attention. Someone injected you. Theo looked toward the locked door. Only family medical staff had access. Evelyn removed her gloves. Then stopped questioning who brought the drink. Her gaze met Luca's. Start with the person who was allowed to touch you. 4 days later, after 2 blood transfusions and 48 hours without complications, Luca was discharged under restrictions he had no intention of respecting. Evelyn's shift ended shortly after 10 that night. She noticed the dark sedan only after pulling out of the employee garage. It followed through 2 turns, keeping enough distance to look accidental. She reached for the secure phone Theo had given her, but headlights flooded her mirror before she could call. A black SUV cut between her car and the sedan, forcing both vehicles to stop beneath a red light. Luca stepped from the passenger side wearing a dark coat over a shirt that concealed the fresh bandage beneath his ribs. He moved carefully, though pride tried to disguise it. Evelyn lowered her window. You were told to rest. His attention remained on the sedan. You're being followed. That doesn't make you medically cleared for street confrontations. 2 men climbed from the other vehicle. Neither displayed a weapon, but both carried the confidence of people who expected fear to do the work for them. One raised his hands. We only want the medical file she took. Evelyn glanced at the folder on her passenger seat. She had accidentally carried it out with her discharge notes. Luca moved in front of her car. His voice stayed quiet. You followed the woman responsible for keeping me alive. Evelyn opened her door. Still not your private nurse. His eyes flicked toward her. I'm aware. Luca recited the first man's name, his wife's workplace, and the company paying for the sedan. The second man lost color before Luca finished. No threats followed. None were needed. The folder changed hands within seconds. Theo took both phones and sent the men away with one cold gesture. Evelyn waited until the sedan disappeared, then turned on Luca. You had me watched. I had the file watched. That distinction is doing very little for you. He shifted his weight and pressed one hand briefly against his side. Evelyn caught the movement. Your stitches are pulling. They're intact. That is not a medical opinion. I've had worse. You keep saying that like it makes this less stupid. Luca looked down at her hand around his forearm. You were in danger. Protection without consent is still a cage. The words landed harder than she expected. Something closed behind his eyes, not anger, but recognition. He reached into his coat and held out a black phone. Secure line. Location sharing stays disabled unless you turn it on. Evelyn did not take it. And if I never do, then I won't know where you are. The answer came without pressure. No hidden command. No demand disguised as concern. She accepted the phone. That was almost respectful. Don't get used to it. Back inside the SUV, Theo opened the recovered folder. Medication logs filled the first pages. Evelyn scanned the signatures, then stopped. The anticoagulant appeared under a false label in Luca's private treatment record. 6 months of small doses, each approved by the same physician. At the bottom of every page was one familiar name. Adriano Bellini, Luca's oldest advisor. The man who had stood beside him since Sophia's death. Evelyn looked across the seat. Who is Adriano? Luca stared at the signature until all warmth left his face. The only man I trusted enough to choose my doctors. For days after the roadside confrontation, Luca's condition had stabilized enough for limited activity. His doctors approved a short family appearance on the condition that he avoid alcohol, strenuous movement, and anything resembling his normal life. Luca agreed to all 3 with the sincerity of a practiced liar. Evelyn expected Luca to confront Adriano immediately. Instead, he asked her to attend the Vassari family dinner the following night. Absolutely not. She stood beside his hospital bed, arms folded, while Theo pretended to study the ceiling. Luca adjusted the cuff of a fresh black shirt, ignoring the fact that he was still under observation. Adriano will notice if I cancel. Then cancel badly. I need someone there who can recognize the drug records. Evelyn glanced at the healing wound beneath his shirt. You need 48 hours of rest. I rested for 6. That explains why your judgment is still impaired. Bianca arrived before the argument could become a siege. She swept into the room carrying 2 garment bags and a smile far too bright for 3 in the afternoon. Good. She hasn't killed you. Yet. Luca's stare turned flat. Why are you here? Bianca kissed his cheek, then handed Evelyn one of the bags. To save this investigation from my brother's personality. 2 hours later, Evelyn stood in Bianca's dressing room wearing a dark emerald gown she had not agreed to keep on. Too formal. Bianca circled her with professional satisfaction. My family considers visible weapons casual. You're fine. Theo waited outside to explain the Vassari security signals. He raised 2 fingers. This means danger. Evelyn copied the gesture. I thought that meant bring food. That's 1 finger. Your organization needs better branding. By the time they entered the private dining room, Luca was already there. His conversation stopped when he saw her. The reaction lasted only a second, but Evelyn caught it. The slight tightening of his hand around the back of a chair, the way his eyes moved over her before settling carefully on her face. You're staring. Luca stepped closer, his voice low enough for her alone. I'm adjusting to the possibility that hospital scrubs were hiding a weapon. It's called a waste. Bianca nearly choked on her champagne. Dinner began with polite smiles and expensive lies. Adriano sat at Luca's right hand, silver-haired and calm, watching everyone with the warmth of a trusted uncle. Evelyn disliked him immediately. When a server poured wine for Luca, she covered his glass with her palm. No alcohol. Every person at the table went silent. Luca looked at her hand, then at her. 1 glass. 1 infection. He pushed the wine away. Bianca leaned toward Theo. I've waited 25 years for this. Theo murmured. We all have. Later, music drifted in from the adjoining ballroom. Adriano's attention sharpened whenever Evelyn moved near Luca, so Luca offered his hand. Walk with me. Evelyn glanced toward the adjoining ballroom. You are not dancing with a healing wound. Luca offered his hand. Then stand close enough to make Adriano believe we are. She placed her hand in his. If you tear a stitch, I'm leaving you on the floor. That sounds almost affectionate. Near the edge of the dance floor, his palms settled at her waist but stopped. Before drawing her closer, he waited. Evelyn felt the question in the space between them and answered by stepping into his hold. They moved only enough to resemble a dance, careful of the wound beneath his shirt. His body was warm, controlled, and tense beneath her hand. You dance well, she admitted. You sound disappointed. I was hoping you had one weakness. Luca's gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. I'm holding it. The words struck deeper than they should have. Evelyn looked away just as Adriano passed behind them, speaking quietly into his phone. The old clinic is secure. Tomorrow's dose proceeds as planned. Evelyn's pulse changed. She waited until dinner resumed, then slipped into Adriano's study. A locked drawer opened with Bianca's borrowed key. Inside was a medical file under Luca's alias. The final page held 1 typed sentence. The next dose will stop the patient's heart without leaving a trace. Scheduled administration, tomorrow morning. Evelyn had just slipped the medical file beneath her shawl when the study door clicked shut behind her. Adriano Bellini stood with 1 hand on the lock, his expression almost kind. You should have stayed at the table. Evelyn kept her breathing even. You should have chosen a better hiding place. His smile thinned. Luca was stronger before you arrived. Less distracted. You mean easier to control. Adriano stepped closer, adjusting his cuff as if they were discussing business. A man in his position cannot afford softness. Affection creates hesitation. Hesitation gets people killed. Evelyn held his gaze. No. You're afraid a man with a heart will realize he doesn't need you. For the first time, the warmth left his face. He reached for the file, but Evelyn moved back. That document belongs to the family. It belongs to the man you've been poisoning. Adriano's eyes cooled. You misunderstand loyalty. I understand dosage records. He crossed the room and pressed a switch beside the desk. The lock engaged with a second click. By morning, this will look like an accident. A faulty heater. Too much smoke. A tragic mistake. Evelyn glanced at the decorative vase beside the desk, then at the electronic control panel near the locked door. You really should stop explaining plans to medical professionals. Adriano frowned. Evelyn moved fast. She hurled the heavy vase into the wall-mounted fire alarm, shattering the cover and triggering the building-wide siren. Before he could stop her, she poured the remaining water across the door's control panel. Sparks snapped inside the lock. The lights flickered, and the electronic bolt released with a sharp click. Adriano lunged for her, but Evelyn drove the heavy medical file into his chest and climbed onto the desk, reaching for the emergency latch above the door. "What are you doing?" "Improving your exit strategy." The door slammed inward as Theo forced it open from the other side. He entered first, weapon drawn, followed by two guards. Smoke from the damaged control panel curled through the doorway. Theo stopped and stared at Evelyn standing behind the desk with the metal medical file raised in both hands. "Should I ask?" She pointed the nozzle at Adriano. No, Luca appeared behind them. He wore the same black suit from dinner, but the calm had vanished from his face. The room changed around him. Even Adriano stepped back. Luca's eyes found Evelyn first. They moved over her wet hair, the red mark on her wrist, the rise and fall of her breathing. Only when he was certain she was standing did he turn to the man who had helped raise him. "You locked her in." Adriano lifted his hands. "Luca, listen to me. You poisoned me." Luca's voice remained quiet, which made it worse. Evelyn stepped down from the desk and caught his arm before he moved closer. His muscles were rigid beneath her fingers. "Not here." His gaze dropped to her hand. "He tried to kill you. Then don't give him the chaos he wants." The words held him. Barely. Theo searched Adriano and found a second phone hidden inside his jacket. Messages filled the screen, dosages, schedules, payments. But one thread made Theo's expression change. "Boss." Luca took the phone. Adriano's confidence cracked. The instructions had not originated from Adriano. He had been reporting to someone else. Each message carried Bianca's private encryption key, one that supposedly existed on only 2 registered devices. Luca looked toward the ballroom, where she had been laughing only minutes earlier. No, Theo checked the authentication twice. The system identifies her phone as the source. Evelyn felt Luca go still beside her. Then a guard rushed into the study, breathless. "Sir, Miss Bianca is gone." On the wet floor near the doorway lay her silver bracelet, broken clean through. Luca picked up Bianca's broken bracelet as if it might cut him. For several seconds, no one in the room moved. Then he closed his fist around the silver chain. "Lock every gate. Search the grounds." Theo reached for his radio. "And Bianca?" Luca's face hardened. "Bring her back alive." Adriano laughed once, bitter and wet beneath the sprinklers. "Still protecting her after what she did." Luca turned slowly. "You should pray she did nothing." Evelyn took the phone from Theo and opened the message thread. The access code matched Bianca's line, but the timestamps were wrong. 3 messages had been sent while Bianca was sitting beside Evelyn at dinner, arguing over dessert. "She didn't send these." Luca's eyes moved to her. "You're certain?" "Unless your sister can text through a locked phone while holding a fork in each hand." Theo almost smiled, then remembered the situation. Evelyn scrolled deeper. The earliest message included a hidden authentication file copied from an old hospital database. Bianca had used the same private device to sign a medical consent form 2 years earlier. Someone had extracted the encryption certificate and cloned it onto another phone. "The messages look like they came from her," Evelyn murmured. "But someone built the lie from an old hospital record." Adriano's confidence faltered. Luca noticed. "Who?" "I don't know." Luca stepped toward him. Evelyn moved between them before the room could turn ugly. "He wants you angry." Angry men miss details. Luca looked down at her, jaw tight. "My sister is missing." "Then trust me long enough to find her." The words held him more effectively than any guard could have. He exhaled once and gave Theo a sharp nod. "Do what she says." They traced Bianca's last known location to the East Wing, where a service camera showed her leaving willingly with a young woman from the catering staff. No struggle, no restraints, just Bianca slipping off her bracelet and dropping it near the study door. "A signal," Evelyn murmured. "She wanted us to know something was wrong without alarming whoever was watching." Luca's expression changed, fear hidden beneath control. Why would she go willingly? Evelyn enlarged the final frame. The young woman beside Bianca was holding a phone toward her. On the screen was a photograph of a teenage boy bound to a chair. "Because someone threatened a person that girl loves." She studied Bianca's expression. "Your sister believed going quietly would keep him alive." Evelyn enlarged the frame. The young woman beside Bianca was crying. A bruise darkened one wrist. She was being threatened. They found Bianca's phone inside a flower arrangement, still recording. Her voice came through in a whisper. "If Luca hears this, tell him I didn't betray him." Tell him I chose to go. Luca looked away, but Evelyn caught the pain in his face before he buried it. Later, after the search teams spread through the city, she found him alone in the darkened library. He stood before Sophia's portrait, Bianca's bracelet still wrapped around his hand. I almost believed it, he admitted. For 1 second, I thought she might have turned against me. Evelyn came to stand beside him. Fear makes suspicion feel like intelligence. I don't know how to protect people without controlling them. She looked at the bracelet cutting into his palm, then stopped treating love like ownership. His eyes found hers. What makes someone stay? A reason they choose for themselves. The silence between them softened. Lucas stepped closer, close enough that his breath touched her cheek, but he did not reach for her. If I gave you that choice, would you leave? Evelyn's pulse betrayed her. Not tonight. She closed the distance first. The kiss was brief, warm, and careful. Lucas stopped before desire became assumption, searching her face. Evelyn answered by pulling him back. The second kiss deepened, still controlled, still chosen. Then Theo burst through the door. Boss. Bianca's location just came through. On the screen was a warehouse address, and a message beneath it. Bring Evelyn Hart, or Bianca dies before midnight. Luca rejected the plan before Theo finished reading the message. She's not going. Evelyn took the phone from his hand. They asked for me because they need something only I can do. That makes you bait. It makes me useful. His expression turned cold enough to silence the room. You are not walking into a warehouse for my sister. Evelyn stepped closer. 5 minutes ago, you asked what makes someone stay. This is the part where you let them choose. The words struck exactly where she intended. Luca looked away first. When he faced her again, the anger was still there, but it no longer carried an order. You follow the plan. If anything changes, you leave. My medical decisions are mine. His jaw flexed. Agreed. Theo handed her a protective vest. Evelyn held it against herself. Do you have one that wasn't designed for a refrigerator? That is the small. She tightened the straps. Your organization needs women. Theo glanced at Luca. We've recently identified that weakness. 20 minutes later, Evelyn entered the warehouse alone with a medical bag in one hand and the secure phone in the other. Luca's team watched from hidden positions outside. The building smelled of oil and disinfectant. A row of work lights illuminated Bianca sitting beside the crying catering woman from the security footage. Neither was tied. Bianca rose quickly. Evelyn, you shouldn't be here. I get that a lot. A man emerged from behind a plastic partition wearing a tailored gray coat. Silver hair. Surgeon's hands. Evelyn knew him before he smiled. Dr. Elias Crown. Daniel's father. The man who had stood beside her at a funeral and let her believe she had failed his son. You look well, Elias observed. You look criminal. His smile remained calm. Bianca came willingly. My associate threatened Miss Alvarez's younger brother. She believed cooperation would keep him alive. The young woman began to cry harder. Bianca moved protectively in front of her. Let them go. Elias ignored her and focused on Evelyn's bag. You brought the stabilizer. You asked for a nurse, not a pharmacy. He gestured toward a metal case on the table. Inside was a compact medical transmitter. Evelyn's pulse tightened. The device was designed to communicate with implanted cardiac equipment at close range. Evelyn recognized the programming interface immediately. Luca has a pacemaker. Elias watched recognition spread across her face. Placed after his cardiac injury 3 years ago. The device itself was legitimate. The replacement control module was not. He touched the transmitter. At close range, I can force it into an unsafe pacing mode. Evelyn kept her expression still. You poisoned him to weaken his heart before using this. Adriano handled the medication. Poorly, as it turns out. A tiny movement above the rafters caught her eye. Theo was in position. She needed time. What do you want me to do? Correct the programming sequence. Luca's recent blood loss and medication changes make his response unpredictable. I need someone capable of keeping him alive while the device forces him into an unstable rhythm. Elias stepped closer. I need him alive long enough to sign control of the family holdings. Evelyn opened her bag slowly. And afterward, his silence answered. Bianca shifted, preparing to move, but Evelyn gave the smallest shake of her head. Not yet. Elias placed the transmitter in front of her. You always were talented under pressure. The old guilt returned like a hand closing around her throat. Daniel on a trauma bed. Alarms. Blood on her gloves. Elias telling her she had hesitated. You blame me for Daniel. His face softened with practiced sympathy. You were emotional. Young. Mistakes happen. Evelyn looked directly at him. What mistake? Something flickered behind his eyes. Too late. Luca's voice came through the hidden earpiece, low and furious. He had heard everything. Elias leaned closer, almost pleased. You still believe my son died because you froze? The warehouse seemed to narrow around her. Didn't he? Elias smiled. No, Evelyn. Daniel died because I ordered the hospital to save someone more valuable. For 5 years, Evelyn had carried Daniel's death like a verdict. Now, the man who had handed her that guilt stood 10 feet away and admitted it had never belonged to her. You chose another patient? Her voice remained steady, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the metal table. Elias gave a small shrug. A senator's son arrived at the same time, and the hospital used his case to justify delaying Daniel's surgery. But funding was only part of it. Elias's expression remained disturbingly calm. Daniel had discovered irregular trials inside my private clinics. If he survived, he intended to report me. Bianca's face hardened. He was your son. Something empty entered Elias's eyes. He had chosen to become a witness before he chose to remain my son. The words cut deeper than any weapon in the room. Evelyn remembered Daniel laughing in her kitchen, stealing strawberries from the cutting board, promising they would grow old somewhere quiet. Then she remembered the alarms, the locked operating room, Elias telling her she had hesitated too long. You let me believe I killed him. Elias stepped closer. Guilt kept you silent. A soft click came from the shadows above. Theo's signal. Evelyn slid one hand into her medical bag. And Luca? He discovered the clinics I used to move money and test unapproved treatments. He planned to shut them down. Elias touched the transmitter. Men like Luca only understand loss. Luca's voice entered Evelyn's earpiece, rough with control. Move away from him. She ignored the order. Elias still needed to confess enough for the recording. So you weakened his heart first. Small doses. Nothing dramatic. Adriano believed he was protecting the family from an unstable leader. And Bianca? Leverage. Bianca's chin lifted. You picked the wrong family. The warehouse lights died. Luca's men moved through the darkness with trained precision. A shout broke near the rear entrance, followed by the heavy crash of a body hitting concrete. Elias grabbed Evelyn and pressed a small blade against her side. Luca appeared between 2 rows of machinery, his weapon lowered but ready. The fury in his face was almost physical. Let her go. Elias dragged Evelyn backward. 1 step and her blood is on your hands. Evelyn felt the blade, felt Luca's panic beneath the stillness of his body. She also felt the transmitter against Elias's coat. You taught me something useful, she murmured. Elias frowned. What? She drove her heel down on his foot, twisted free, and struck his wrist with the metal edge of her bag. The blade fell. Theo crossed the distance and forced Elias to the ground before he could recover. Luca reached Evelyn first. His hands stopped inches from her shoulders, waiting for permission even while fear tore through his expression. She nodded once. He pulled her against him. The embrace was tight, protective, but not possessive. You knew. He breathed near her hair. You heard everything. Enough. He leaned back, searching her face. Why didn't you tell me about Daniel? Evelyn looked toward Elias being restrained. Because I thought his death proved I couldn't be trusted when it mattered. Luca's anger softened into something more dangerous to her defenses. You saved me while carrying another man's lie. Her breath broke. For the first time, she let the tears come. Luca did not tell her to stop. He sat with her on the warehouse floor, one hand open between them until she chose to take it. It was never your fault. Evelyn closed her fingers around his. I know that now. Theo approached with the transmitter, his face pale. Boss, there's a problem. The transmitter had activated during the struggle and locked onto Luca's pacemaker from close range. Luca's hand tightened around Evelyn's as the portable receiver began screaming. The forced pacing sequence destabilized his rhythm. His pulse stumbled, accelerated, then collapsed into a dangerous ventricular arrhythmia. Elias smiled from the floor. You have 3 minutes, Nurse Hart. Luca's knees hit the concrete before anyone understood what was happening. Evelyn caught him under the shoulders and lowered him carefully, one hand already searching for a pulse. Fast. Weak. Irregular. Theo, open the medical case. Bianca, Keep Elias away from the transmitter. Luca forced his eyes open. Leave. Evelyn tore his shirt wider and placed the monitor leads against his chest. No device could trigger. Again. Then stop talking and let me work. The screen filled with a chaotic rhythm. Ventricular tachycardia. His pulse was fading. Elias watched from across the warehouse, restrained but smiling. The transmitter is forcing the pacemaker into an unsafe sequence. Shut it down incorrectly, and the rhythm gets worse. Evelyn studied the interface. The system used a modified clinical programming pattern, not a military signal. She recognized enough of the logic to see the trap. He wants us to disconnect the transmitter while it's still sending. Theo opened the emergency kit. What do you need? Defibrillator pads. Oxygen. Now. Luca caught her wrist, his grip already weakening. If this fails, she looked down at him, anger cutting through fear. The first night we met, you threatened me for touching you. Now you're going to stay quiet while I save you. A faint breath almost became a laugh. Bossy. Unstable patients don't get opinions. Bianca sealed the oxygen mask over his face while Evelyn placed the pads against his chest. The monitor climbed into a faster, disorganized rhythm. Then Luca lost his pulse. Charging. Theo pulled everyone back. Evelyn kept her eyes on the screen. Clear. The shock lifted Luca's body from the concrete. The rhythm remained chaotic. Resume compressions. Theo moved into position while Evelyn prepared the next charge. Elias lifted his head. You'll never stabilize him while the transmitter stays active. Evelyn met his eyes. The transmitter isn't the power source. It's the instruction. His expression changed. That was confirmation. She reached for the controller, disabled the outgoing command sequence, then returned to Luca. Charge again. Clear. The second shock struck. 1 second passed. Then another. A narrow rhythm appeared on the monitor. 38. 46. 58. Evelyn checked his neck. I have a pulse. Bianca released a broken breath. Theo sat back on his heels. Evelyn kept one hand over Luca's chest until the beat beneath her palm became steady. Luca's breathing deepened beneath the oxygen mask. Theo sat back hard on the floor. Bianca covered her mouth. Evelyn kept her hand over Luca's chest until the beat beneath her palm felt real. Several minutes later, Luca's eyelids moved beneath the oxygen mask. His eyes opened only halfway, unfocused at first, then found Evelyn. You trusted me, she whispered. His fingers shifted weakly beneath hers. With everything. The answer was weak, but certain. Sirens approached outside. Elias was taken into custody with the transmitter, recordings, and treatment files. Adriano agreed to testify. Bianca and Miss Alvarez were safe. By sunrise, Luca was stable in a private hospital room. When he woke, the chair beside his bed was empty. On the table lay the secure phone and a handwritten note. You learned how to trust me. Now learn how to live without owning me. 3 months passed before Luca Vassari saw Evelyn Hart again. In that time, he did something no one in his family believed possible. He stopped giving orders long enough to listen. The private clinics tied to Elias were closed. Adriano signed a full confession and entered federal custody. Bianca took control of the family's legitimate charities, while Theo began dismantling the operations that harmed innocent people and transferring the remaining legal businesses to independent management. It was not a clean transformation, and it was far from complete, but Luca had stopped pretending darkness was the only inheritance available to him. Luca created the Sofia Vassari Foundation and placed it under an independent board. He did not name Evelyn. He did not send flowers. He did not place men outside her apartment. He did not even activate the secure phone she had left beside his hospital bed. Restraint, he discovered, hurt more than any bullet. Evelyn returned to County General and worked the same brutal shifts as before. She slept better now. Daniel's ring still rested against her chest, but it no longer felt like a chain. One Tuesday afternoon, she crossed the hospital's outpatient waiting area and stopped. Lucas sat beneath a sign that read, "Please have insurance information ready." He wore a dark coat, no visible security, and held a paper ticket marked 47. Theo sat beside him with ticket 48 and the expression of a man reconsidering every life choice. Evelyn checked the nearly empty room. You could have called. Luca glanced at the number display. You said everyone waits. Theo lifted his ticket. We've been here 72 minutes. Love is patient. Luca's eyes remained on Evelyn. Theo is not. Theo rose. I suddenly remember an urgent crime-free meeting. He disappeared down the hall. Evelyn looked at Luca's hands. No blood. No injury. What happened? Nothing. Then why are you in my emergency department? Luca stood and offered her a slim folder. This. Inside was a proposal for 3 community clinics serving uninsured patients, funded by the Sophia Foundation but governed by hospital staff. Evelyn read the first page, then the second. You gave the board full authority, including the right to remove me. No private Vassari security inside the clinics. Correct. No priority treatment for donors. That clause was Bianca's idea. Evelyn closed the folder. What do you want from me? Luca did not move closer. That mattered. I want you to advise the medical board. And if I refuse, I thank you for reading it. No pressure. No hidden contract. No carefully decorated cage. Evelyn studied the man in front of her and found the same danger, the same control, but no demand. You changed. Luca's expression remained calm, though his hand tightened once at his side. Not enough. Why do you think that? Because I still wanted to come here every day. The honesty caught her off guard. He continued before she could answer. But wanting access to you does not give me the right to take it. Evelyn felt something warm and painful settle beneath her ribs. That almost sounded healthy. I've been supervised. By Bianca? Relentlessly. A smile escaped her before she could stop it. Luca watched it as if it were worth more than the entire city. Evelyn handed back the folder. I'll consider the board position. That is more than I expected. She stepped past him, then paused. Dinner. Friday. 7:30. His brows lifted. A meeting, not a date. Luca's mouth curved slowly. Of course. Evelyn walked away before he could see her smile again. Behind her, Theo reappeared from around the corner. Is it a date? Luca watched Evelyn disappear through the trauma doors. Absolutely. Then the number display changed to 47, and for the first time in his life, Luca Vassari ignored being called. 1 year later, Evelyn stood inside the 3rd Sophia Vassari Community Clinic while reporters photographed the ribbon cutting, and Bianca cried harder than anyone with an actual reason. The clinics had treated more than 12,000 uninsured patients. No donor received priority. No private Vassari security officer entered the treatment areas armed. Luca had kept the promises that mattered most. He still made mistakes, but he no longer disguised control as protection or called fear loyalty. He still controlled a room without raising his voice. He still checked every exit. He still frightened men who deserved to be frightened. But he no longer confused fear with loyalty. When the crowd finally left, Evelyn found him on the rooftop terrace, one hand resting in his coat pocket. You disappeared from your own celebration. Luca looked toward the clinic windows below. It was Sophia's celebration. She would have been proud of you. The words unsettled him more than praise ever had. He turned, and the usual certainty in his face gave way to something quieter. There's one more thing. Evelyn folded her arms. If this involves buying another hospital, I'm leaving. It involves asking before making a decision. Now I'm worried. Luca took out a small velvet box. Inside lay Sophia's ring, a simple diamond set in white gold. He did not kneel. He did not reach for Evelyn's hand. He only held the box between them. I spent most of my life believing love meant keeping people close enough that nothing could take them from me. His gaze stayed on hers. You taught me that a locked door is still a locked door, even when the room is beautiful. Evelyn's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. That sounds expensive for therapy. Bianca charges more. A laugh slipped from her, easing the tension. Luca's expression softened. I don't want you to belong to me. Evelyn raised one brow. Progress. I want permission to belong in your life. For once, the most feared man in the city had no strategy, no leverage, no guarantee, just an open box and the patience to accept whatever answer came next. Evelyn let the silence stretch until a trace of genuine panic entered his eyes. Then she held out her hand. You can start by taking your antibiotics on time. Luca exhaled, half laugh, half surrender, and slid the ring onto her finger. That sounds like a yes. It sounds like a conditional treatment plan. They married 6 months later in the clinic garden. Bianca sobbed through the vows. Theo nearly dropped the rings when Evelyn added an unscripted vow requiring Luca to stop using security teams to reserve parking spaces. Dr. Miles signed as witness. then reminded Luca that marriage did not make him Evelyn's medical emergency contact without paperwork. Luca completed the forms before the cake was cut. He never became harmless. Evelyn never asked him to. She only asked him to become honest, responsible, and brave enough to love without control. And Evelyn did not become softer. She became free. She kept Daniel's ring in a small box, not as punishment, but as proof that grief could be honored without becoming a prison. People once said no nurse could survive Luca Vassari. They were wrong. Evelyn never survived him. She challenged him, left when he confused love with possession, and returned only when he learned that power could protect without controlling. In the end, Luca learned what no empire, weapon, or family law had ever taught him. Fear may force people to remain in the room, but only respect makes them stay when the door is open. And sometimes the strongest form of love is not tightening your grip. It is opening your hand, surrendering control, and trusting that the right person will choose to place theirs inside it.